Hi everyone, this is the latest legal information video from Right to Remain, and this time the video is on country of origin evidence. What country of origin evidence is, what good evidence might look like, where to find it, and what to do with it once you've found it. As we mentioned on our previous legal information video on evidence in asylum, immigration and human rights applications, and you can find that video on our YouTube channel and our legal blog as well, evidence is information to prove to the Home Office or maybe to the courts that you are telling the truth, that you can't go back to your country of origin, that you shouldn't have to leave the UK. This video is looking specifically at country of origin evidence, so evidence about the country that you're from or the country that you normally live in. And this will be most relevant for asylum claims, but it will also be useful for other kinds of situations, such as if you're applying for the right to stay in the UK based on family members and you need to show why the family can't go and relocate in another country, and maybe also in healthcare cases where you're showing that you need to stay in the UK to get life-saving, life-preserving healthcare treatment. In this video, we're looking at country of origin evidence that is publicly available, that you could find, that's general information about your country or particular groups of people in your country or a particular situation. We're not looking at specifically commissioned evidence about your particular situation. That would be expert evidence, which a lawyer or you may ask an expert on your country to comment directly on whether they think what you've said has happened or could happen is likely to happen. We're not looking at expert evidence in this video. So when might you need country of origin evidence? Well, in an asylum claim, it might be at several different points throughout the claim. If it's an early point, it actually might be your lawyer who finds country of origin evidence. It's not normally needed at the very early stages of a claim if you come from a country that's fairly well known or your situation is fairly well understood. It's not a particularly complicated or unusual situation. You might find actually that it's the Home Office who are looking at country of origin evidence at the early points, like your asylum substantive interview. They might print off, for example, information from the BBC website about your country and ask you questions about your country in your interview to test if you come from the country you say you come from. But if we're thinking about you as the person seeking the right to stay in the UK, it's likely you will need country of origin evidence at the appeal stage if the Home Office refuse your asylum claim. And you're very likely to need it if you are wanting to give further submissions to the Home Office to be considered as a fresh claim. And it's quite common in that situation for a lawyer to say to you, as the person seeking the right to stay, you need to go and find evidence about your country, bring it to me, and then I will help you make the fresh claim. Let's have a look at some principles about using country of origin evidence before we go on to look at where you might find that evidence and what to do with it when you found it. So the principles we're going to look at is that the country of origin evidence needs to be relevant to your case. It needs to be trustworthy, and it needs to be what's considered to be objective. So let's look at whether it's relevant first of all. There may be lots of information about your country available online or from other sources, but does it directly speak to why you need to stay in the UK, why you can't go back to your country? So, for example, if you manage to find a human rights report about your government imprisoning or persecuting people who are in an opposition political group, but your claim is based on the fact that you are gay, that evidence about the political opposition group is unlikely to be relevant. Yes, it shows a general picture of oppression and lack of freedoms, but it needs to be much more specific to the reason that you've claimed asylum or are saying you need to stay in the UK. Another consideration about whether information is relevant is how old the information is. You need to try and find the most recent information as possible. If you can only find information from a few years ago, the Home Office or the courts might say, we accept that information there, but the situation might have changed since then. So either find recent information or try and show that the situation has not changed since this last report or news item was produced. The next thing to consider is the country of origin evidence trustworthy? Where are you getting this evidence from? You might find that the Home Office use Wikipedia in rejecting your claim or talking to you about your claim, but you should not do this. Wikipedia is a crowd-edited website, and although useful for chronological basic facts, is not considered to be trustworthy in the form of evidence. You need to find evidence that has been produced by what are considered to be credible sources. So human rights organisations, internationally accepted human rights organisations, respected media outlets. There is a hierarchy of evidence in these kinds of situations where it may be that a small political group, a small newspaper actually has the most useful information for you, but if they're not seen as being trusted, if they're not known by the Home Office or the courts, that evidence still might be rejected. And then related to whether evidence is trustworthy is whether evidence is seen as being objective. It might be that a small rights group, for example, knows the best how a community is being treated. They are witnessing, they are evidencing firsthand how their community is being persecuted by the government. But that group, or any research evidence produced by that group, is likely to be seen by the Home Office and the courts as not being objective because they're in opposition to the government, they're biased, they would say that because they are fighting the government against the government. What can be useful is if you use that kind of evidence as a starting point and then try and find things that are referred to in that evidence in human rights reports by international NGOs, organisations, for example, or that are reported on, or the research is referred to in a mainstream news outlet. Okay, so we've talked about what to look for or what to avoid in principle about country of origin information. Now let's have a look at where you might find it. We've actually got a website that's part of the Right to Remain toolkit all about country of origin information, which you can see the link to here. On this website, we link to other sources of information that are seen to be credible in terms of country of origin evidence. So big human rights organisations like Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International. There's a really useful website called RefWorld, which is produced by the UN Refugee Agency, UNHCR. And then there's a couple of maybe less expected sources of information unless you are used to working on asylum claims, such as the United States State Department's country reports on human rights. Now, we're not going to comment here about the US producing reports on other people's human rights, but it actually is a really useful source of human rights information that is considered to be credible and accepted by the courts. We've then got lots of links to general organisations that might produce information, and then you can find different sources of themed information. So do you need information on the armed forces, maybe forced military conscription, for example? There's information about children, child labour, child soldiers. There's information about the death penalty in different countries, ethnic groups and minorities, LGBT issues, a really useful one, how journalists are treated in different countries, how different religions or lack of religions are treated in different countries. There's a section on women, and related to that, there's a section on FGM. And you can go through to any of those websites and then use those websites' own search functions to find the information you're looking for. You could, of course, just Google what you're looking for, but then you need to do the test of whether the information that's come up, is it from a credible, trustworthy, objective source. If it's from one of the organisations listed on our webpage, you're okay. But if it's not, have a look at the information about the webpage, who's the author of the information, who produces that webpage. Also, a useful reminder that it can help to have a look at the Home Office's own documents about the situation in your country of origin and how cases relating to those countries should be treated. Quite a lot of information in those documents isn't very helpful, and they have a particular reading of situations and important cases that we might not agree with. But if the Home Office's own guidance accepts that certain people are at risk in your country and you are in that group of people, that's really helpful for your case, and you should definitely refer to that in your legal case. Another source of potentially useful information about your country of origin are country guidance cases, which we do refer to as well in our case law video. Country guidance cases are cases decided in the upper tribunal, the court, which say that this is the situation in this country at the time of this decision, or for a particular group of people in the country, and it's determined to be based on the best possible evidence available at the time, and that situation is considered to be the correct situation until a new country guidance case comes along that might change the position. Even if the country guidance case judgment itself isn't useful, for example, if it says it's safe for you to go back to your country, or it's safe for this particular group of people in the country, within that judgment you might find reference to evidence, human rights reports, which could be really useful for your case. So once you've gone through all these different sources of where you might find evidence, what do you do with country of origin evidence? Well, if you've got a lawyer, you should give it to your lawyer. They will be able to then use that to make legal arguments about why you should be given the right to stay, or why this counts as fresh evidence that should be considered as a fresh claim. They also do need to check whether they think it's relevant to your case and whether it's helpful, because hidden within things that you think are helpful, there may actually be references to things that undermine your case, so it's really important to keep an eye out for that as well. If you haven't got a lawyer and you're going to have to submit it yourself, for example, as further submissions for a fresh claim, and you can find a lot more information about this in the fresh claims section of the Right to Remain Toolkit, remember to do a kind of double check before you send anything to the Home Office or to the courts if you're appealing yourself. Does what you're submitting, does the evidence you're submitting contradict anything else you have said at any point in your application, in your asylum claim, for example? Is it relevant to you? Is it relevant to your specific situation, your particular reason why you would not be safe in your country or why you need to stay in the UK? Is it recent? If it's not recent, has the situation changed in the country? Where is the evidence from? Is it going to be considered to be trustworthy, to be objective? And remember, you don't just want to submit the evidence to the Home Office with no explanation. You need to explain how that evidence proves your point, proves that you cannot go back to your country, maybe proves elements of your story that the Home Office or the courts have said they don't believe happened.